Sophie sat on the couch staring blankly at the wall, her mind replaying the moment over and over again. 2 years. 2 years of laughter, tears, passion, and heartbreak, all crumbling into dust with one careless sentence. Sorry, I can't make it this year. I promised my wife and daughter. Wife. Daughter. The words struck like a hammer. Her hands still trembled as she remembered his casual tone, as if he'd just mentioned picking up milk from the grocery store. Her heart raced with anger, betrayal, and confusion. How could she have missed this? How could she have spent 2 years of her life devoted to a man who had an entire family hiding in plain sight? Sophie had met Ethan in the most serendipitous way. She had tumbled down the stairs backstage at the local theater, landing in his arms like something out of a romantic comedy. He was charming, magnetic, and full of passion for his work as an actor. His confidence and dramatic flair captivated her. He had swept her off her feet, quite literally, and she had fallen for him, hard. There had been signs, sure. He was often unavailable during holidays, his phone was always turned face down, and he refused to let her tag him in photos on social media. But he always had explanations. Rehearsals, he'd say. I'm just not a social media person. Or, I just need some time to myself. And she had believed him. Now, the truth sat like a heavy stone in her chest. He wasn't just lying to her. He was lying to his wife, his child. His entire life was a performance, just like the ones he gave on stage. When she'd packed his belongings and thrown them out onto the street, Sophie thought she'd feel a sense of triumph. But there was no satisfaction, only heartbreak. Ethan had pounded on the door for hours, his voice muffled but pleading. Sophie, please. It's not what you think. I love you. Just let me explain. But there was nothing to explain. And now, as she sat curled up in a blanket, eyes swollen from crying, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up without thinking, assuming it was another futile attempt from Ethan. But it wasn't him. Hello, she said hesitantly, her voice hoarse. The voice on the other end was soft but firm. Is this Sophie? Yes, she replied, her heart racing. This is Emily, the woman said after a pause. Ethan's wife. Sophie froze, her stomach twisting into a knot. Emily began, then stopped, as if searching for the right words. I just wanted you to know. I didn't know about you. He lied to both of us. The lump in Sophie's throat grew larger. She wanted to hang up, to avoid the confrontation entirely, but something in Emily's voice stopped her. It wasn't anger or blame, it was pain. I didn't know about you either, Sophie whispered, tears welling up again. I'm so sorry. The two women sat in silence, both too overwhelmed to speak. It was Emily who broke the quiet. I've kicked him out, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I don't want him near me or our daughter, not during the holidays, not ever. He's a liar and a coward. But I'd like to meet you, Sophie. If you're willing. Sophie blinked in surprise. Why? Because I think we both deserve the truth, Emily said simply. Sophie hesitated, then nodded, even though Emily couldn't see her. Okay. The call ended, leaving Sophie feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. She didn't know what to expect from the meeting, but she knew one thing for certain. She needed closure. The cafe was bustling with holiday cheer. The sound of Christmas carols filled the air, and the scent of cinnamon and freshly baked cookies wafted from the counter. Sophie sat nervously at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Emily arrived exactly on time. She was elegant, with dark brown hair swept into a neat bun and piercing green eyes that held both strength and sadness. She didn't look like someone who had just thrown her husband out of the house. She looked composed, collected. Hi, Emily said, her voice soft but steady. Hi, Sophie replied, standing awkwardly before they both sat down. For a moment, they just stared at each other, unsure of where to begin. Finally, Emily broke the silence. You're not what I expected, she admitted with a small smile. Sophie raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? I don't know, Emily said, shrugging. Someone younger. Flashier. Someone who would fit the cliché of the other woman. Sophie bristled. I didn't know I was the other woman, she said, her tone sharper than she intended. I know, Emily said quickly. I didn't mean it like that. I guess I wanted to hate you. But I don't. Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly. I wanted to hate you too, she admitted. But now that I'm sitting here, I just feel sorry for both of us. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. He's a master manipulator. Always has been. But I never thought he'd stoop this low. For the next hour, the two women compared notes, piecing together the timeline of Ethan's lies. They discovered that he had been juggling them both with disturbing ease, weaving elaborate stories to cover his tracks. He had spent weekends with Sophie under the guise of work trips, and lied to Emily about late-night rehearsals when he was actually with Sophie. By the end of the conversation, both women were drained but oddly united. What are you going to do now? Sophie asked. Emily sighed. Focus on my daughter. File for divorce. And try to rebuild my life. Sophie nodded. Same here. Except for the daughter part. They both laughed, a small but genuine moment of levity in an otherwise heavy conversation. As they parted ways, Emily reached out and squeezed Sophie's hand. Thank you, she said. For what? Sophie asked, surprised. For not being the enemy, Emily said with a sad smile. Word of Ethan's double life spread quickly. It started with Emily's divorce filing, which included damning details about his infidelity. Then came the whispers at the theater, where Ethan's colleagues and friends began to distance themselves from him. Sophie tried to move on, throwing herself into work and spending time with friends. But everywhere she went, there were reminders of Ethan. A song on the radio. A flyer for his next play. Even a random man wearing the same cologne he used. She blocked his number and deleted every photo she had of him, but the memories lingered. One night, as she was scrolling through her phone, a message popped up from an unknown number. I miss you, it read. She didn't need to ask who it was. Sophie stared at the message for a long time before typing a response. You don't miss me. You miss getting away with it. Then she blocked the number. Months later, Sophie received an unexpected invitation from Emily. It was for a small holiday gathering at her house, a way to start fresh and surround herself with supportive people. At first, Sophie hesitated. The idea of spending time with Ethan's ex-wife seemed strange. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much they had in common. When she arrived at Emily's house, she was greeted with warmth and kindness. Emily's daughter, a precocious 8-year-old named Lily, charmed Sophie immediately. As the evening went on, Sophie found herself laughing and smiling in a way she hadn't in months. She realized that while Ethan had caused her immense pain, he had also inadvertently brought her and Emily together. They weren't victims anymore. They were survivors. Ethan tried to win both women back, of course. He showed up at Sophie's door with flowers and apologies. He wrote Emily long, heartfelt letters begging for forgiveness. But neither of them budged. Emily finalized her divorce and started a new job in a different city. Sophie began dating again, cautiously but optimistically. One day, as she walked through the park where she had first met Ethan, Sophie felt a strange sense of peace. She no longer saw the spot where she had fallen for his charm as a place of pain. Instead, it was a reminder of how far she had come. She didn't need Ethan. She didn't need closure from him, either. She had found it in herself, and in the unlikely friendship she had formed with Emily. Sometimes, life doesn't give you a fairy tale ending. But if you're lucky, it gives you the strength to write your own. Sophie's life was beginning to find balance again. She had even started seeing someone new, a man named Peter who worked in publishing. Peter was everything Ethan wasn't: honest, considerate, and calm. He didn't have the dramatic flair that Ethan had used to charm her, but that was exactly what Sophie appreciated about him. There was no performance, no mystery. Just quiet, steady affection. Still, Ethan lingered in her mind like a ghost she couldn't exorcise. It wasn't that she missed him. Far from it. But the betrayal, the humiliation, and the lies had left a scar that wouldn't fully heal. Every now and then, she would catch herself questioning Peter's sincerity, wondering if he, too, was capable of hiding an entire life behind her back. One afternoon, as Sophie was organizing her closet, she came across a small box tucked into the corner. Inside were mementos from her time with Ethan, a ticket stub from their first play together, a handwritten note he had once left on her car windshield, a pressed flower he had given her during a walk in the park. She sat on the floor, holding the note in her hands. It was strange, seeing these relics of a time that now felt like a completely different life. She thought about throwing them away, but something stopped her. Instead, she put the box back where she had found it, tucked away and out of sight. Some parts of the past, she realized, weren't meant to be erased completely. They were meant to be acknowledged, then left behind. One evening, Sophie received a text message from Emily. Emily, hey. Weird question, but do you have time to meet for coffee this week? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Sophie was intrigued. She hadn't seen Emily in months, not since the small holiday gathering at her house. They had kept in touch sporadically, exchanging updates and the occasional funny meme, but their lives had largely moved in separate directions. Curious, Sophie agreed to meet. They met at the same cafe where they had first talked all those months ago. Emily looked radiant, her confidence restored. What's up? Sophie asked after they'd hugged and ordered their drinks. Emily hesitated, stirring her tea. I didn't know if I should bring this up, but Ethan reached out to me. Sophie froze. What did he want? He claims he's changed, Emily said, rolling her eyes. He says he's in therapy, working on his issues, and he wants to make amends. He even hinted at wanting to try again. Sophie felt a knot of anger tighten in her chest. And what did you say? Emily smirked. I told him to shove it, obviously. But it got me thinking. Do you think people like him can actually change? Sophie considered the question. I think some people can if they truly want to. But Ethan? I don't know. He's a great actor, Emily. That's what makes him dangerous. Emily nodded. Exactly. I just wanted to warn you, in case he tries to pull something with you too. Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. Thanks for the heads up. As they said goodbye, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't done causing trouble. Sophie's intuition was right. 2 weeks later, she was leaving work when she spotted Ethan leaning against a car. Her stomach sank. She thought about turning around and walking away, but Ethan saw her before she could act. Sophie, he said, his voice soft and pleading. She crossed her arms. What do you want, Ethan? He stepped closer, his expression earnest. I needed to see you. To apologize. I know I messed up. More than messed up, I ruined everything. But I'm trying to make things right. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Right. You think you can make this right? I'm in therapy, he said quickly. I've been going for months now. I'm working on my issues, trying to figure out why I hurt the people I care about. Sophie couldn't help but laugh bitterly. That's great, Ethan. But your epiphany doesn't change what you did. It doesn't erase the lies, the manipulation. You don't get a do-over just because you've finally realized you're a narcissist. I don't want a do-over, he said, his voice breaking. I just want a chance to show you I'm not that guy anymore. Please. Sophie. Can we at least talk? Go for a coffee or something. Sophie stared at him, her mind racing. She could see the desperation in his eyes, but she also knew better than to trust him. No, Ethan, she said firmly. You don't get that chance. I've moved on. And you should too. She got into her car and drove away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the parking lot. Sophie's encounter with Ethan left her shaken, but it also gave her a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time, she felt truly free of his shadow. Her relationship with Peter was progressing slowly but steadily. He was patient with her, understanding her fears and giving her the space she needed to heal. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a park, Peter stopped and turned to her. You know, he said, I feel really lucky to have met you. Sophie smiled. Why's that? Because you're strong, he said simply. You've been through so much, but you're still here, still open to love. That's rare. His words touched something deep within her. For so long, she had seen herself as broken, damaged by Ethan's betrayal. But Peter saw her differently. And maybe, she realized, it was time to start seeing herself that way, too. A year later, Sophie was hosting a dinner party at her apartment. Peter was by her side, helping her set the table, while Emily chatted with a group of their mutual friends. It was a lively, joyful evening filled with laughter and good food. As Sophie looked around the room, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life wasn't perfect. No one's was. But it was hers, and it was full of people who cared about her. As the evening wound down, Emily pulled Sophie aside. Hey, she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. I heard from Ethan again. He's dating someone new. Poor girl has no idea what she's getting into. Sophie shook her head with a wry smile. Well, it's not our problem anymore, is it? Emily raised her glass. To freedom, she said. To freedom, Sophie echoed, clinking her glass against Emily's. For the first time in years, Sophie felt truly at peace. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to shape. And she couldn't wait to see what it had in store.